5 minimalist money habits that will change your life forever. What would you do if you had all the money in the world? Well, you might have to answer that question if you put the right money habits into place. And in a minute, I'm going to share with you 5 minimalist money habits that I know will change your life forever, with the 7th habit being one that few people ever use. Habit 1. Identify your money dials. Every 2 weeks, you receive a paycheck. Part of your money goes towards rent, some towards food, and yes, even some towards taxes. Unfortunately, most of our routine spending is consumed by necessities, but just because that's the case, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a handle on how our disposable income is used. You see, about 5 years ago, I really started to get into the world of personal finance. I was making around $40,000 a year at the time and was struggling to get by, so I knew I needed to maximize every dollar I had. As such, I became a voracious reader of personal finance books, and one book that I crossed paths with was I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. In the book, he outlines all the fundamental activities one must perform to start optimizing their finances, and one of his best tips, in my opinion, was to identify your money dials. Money dials are effectively areas of your life you spend money on. It could be entertainment, clothes, travel, etc. Now, identifying these dials offers you 2 distinct purposes. The first is that it allows you to see where your money is going. As the saying goes, what isn't measured isn't managed. So by identifying your money dials, you are gaining a ton more awareness around your own financial situation. Second, by identifying your money dials, you can turn down those that provide you less value and turn up those that do. For instance, I'm not big on going out to eat or buying expensive clothes, so those are money dials that I like to turn down. On the other hand, I love traveling, so I like to direct most of my disposable income in that direction. Ultimately, as a minimalist, your goal is to use your resources as effectively as possible, and by identifying where your money brings you the most value, you can maximize its potential and live a much better life no matter how much money you're presently making. Habit 2. Create a minimalistic budget. While you may want to be a minimalist, one thing you don't want to be minimal is your bank account balance. And if that's the case, then you need to budget and track. Now, I want to admit that budgeting used to be the bane of my existence. I hated creating complex spreadsheets with different cost categories that would take me an hour to fill in every month. And this is coming from an accountant, by the way. So after a while, I asked myself if there was a better way to manage my money without going insane. And fortunately, I came across the split budget. The split budget is by far and away the easiest budget to use, and given how useful it's been for me, I want to share it with you now. The split budget comes down to dividing your total income into 2 groups, your spending and your saving. Let me share an example to explain further. Let's say that you earn $5,000 a month after taxes, and over the last 6 months, you've averaged expenses of $3,000. In this case, you would set up your split budget to be 60% spending and 40% saving. This keeps budgeting nice and simple, and if you think this is a budget you could follow, let me know by gently tapping that like button below. So in this example, as long as you don't spend more than $3,000, then you're good. Although, because you have your savings amount factored in, you can pre-plan what you want to do with this money, such as topping up your emergency fund or investing it in the market. As a minimalist, we want to focus our resources on activities that mean the most to us, and I think I speak for both of us when I say that spending as little time budgeting is something we can all get behind. Habit 3. Avoid unproductive debt. One of the first pieces on financial advice most of us are told is that you should avoid debt when possible. Sadly, for most people, this advice goes in one ear and out the other, and the statistics prove this point. For instance, as of the first quarter of 2022, US household debt rose by $266 billion. That's a lot of debt. Now, I will admit that not all of this debt is what I would call unproductive. Most of this debt consists of mortgages, and while there is an open debate on whether your home is an asset or a liability, I think we can both agree that there are worse forms of debt to have than the ones most people take on to buy a home. However, amidst this rise in debt includes auto loans and credit card debts. and these are the types of unproductive debts you should be steering clear of. Now, in a second, I'm going to share how you can eliminate these forms of debt if you already have them, but first, I want to share an example of just how crippling they can be. Let's say that lately you've been down on your luck, and you've racked up a credit card balance of $10,000 on a card charging you 20%. Given that you aren't making a ton of money, you can only meet your minimum payments of $200. Well, you're in trouble. When we run the numbers, we can see that making just the minimum payments would have you only paying off this balance in 109 months and handing over not just the $10,000 in repayments, but $11,680 in interest. Yes, that's more in interest than you initially borrowed. Now, as a minimalist, we want to use our resources to gain the most value possible, and handing it over to Jeff at your local bank is not how most people would choose to spend their money. But what if you're already in debt? What do you do? Unfortunately, most people overcomplicate the process of debt repayment. So let me simplify things in a more manageable 237-step process. Just kidding, it's only 3 steps. Step 1 is to minimize your expenses. The main driver of eliminating your debt as quickly as possible is being able to put as much of your disposable income towards this activity. As such, if you're able to minimize your costs, you'll unlock more cash. I recommend looking at your larger expenses for savings like housing, food, and transportation. Step 2 is to make more money. As you know, you can only cut your expenses so much, which means that at some point, going out and making more money will be required. I suggest taking on part-time work, working overtime at your current job, or picking up a side hustle. And if you want to learn other ways to make more money, make sure you subscribe, as I'll be talking more about how to do just that in upcoming videos. Step 3. To prioritize your repayments. I know there are a few camps of people when it comes to debt repayments. Some like to use the debt snowball approach, where you pay down your smallest balances first to gain repayment momentum. I can respect this approach, but it is more costly in most cases. In my eyes, you're better off paying down the ones with the highest interest rates first, because as you saw in the example I shared, it's the interest that is going to do the bulk of the damage to your finances over time. Once these 3 steps are in place, you'll be rid of unproductive debt in no time. Habit 4. Buy for satisfaction, not validation. We just talked about money dials and budgets. However, how much of these financial elements are driven by your own desires versus meeting the expectation of others? I think it's a valid question to ask, and it's one that I've posed to myself before. You see, I grew up thinking that buying material goods would make me happy. I still remember telling my family and friends that my first car would be a BMW, and that I would have a massive house when I got older. Little did I know that while I thought I wanted those things for myself, I really wanted them to appease the expectations of those around me. Fortunately, once I adopted the financial minimalism, I ditched seeking the validation of others, and trust me, it has significantly sped up my path to financial freedom. For instance, I never ended up buying a BMW. Hell, I still don't even own a car, and my house is very modest. So, as such, I pay $1,000 a month for my mortgage, and negligible amounts to get around. If I would have pursued seeking the validation of others with my BMW and big house, I could easily be handing over $3,000 a month and forgiving investing that $2,000 difference. Now, it's one thing to tell you to simply stop seeking validation, but it's another to give you some tips that you can use to do just that. So let's get into that now. What worked for me to detach from the approval of others was twofold. First, it was the realization that most people are projecting their desires for themselves onto you, and that what they want isn't always what's best for you. For instance, with the car, most people want a flashy vehicle to show off. For me, I simply don't want the hassle of having to maintain a car, and by avoiding this expense, I not only save money, but save a ton of time and headaches as well. As for the house, the same rings true. It's already a pain in the arse to manage the small house I have, so adding tons of extra square footage would only make this task more cumbersome. The second tactic that allows me to spend more wisely was to be around others who had similar money mindsets. Back when I was younger, I spent time with whoever was around, and often those people were not good financial influences on me. They would spend frivolously, and I would do the same to fit in. However, as I got older, I've aligned myself with people who optimize their finances for financial freedom, just like me. and this has dramatically reduced any remaining feeling I have when it comes to seeking validation. Therefore, as a financial minimalist, be true to you. Ultimately, it's your money and your life, and the more decisions you make on your own behalf, the better. Habit 5. Optimize your time. Obviously, as a minimalist, you want to make the best use of your money. However, if you want to elevate to the highest level of minimalism, you need to also master your time. When I was younger, I used to prioritize maximizing my money. I was not just frugal, but was downright cheap. I would go to 3 different grocery stores just to save a buck, or would spend hours mowing my lawn to cut down my costs. Fortunately, I wisened up over time. But it's not just for the reasons you would expect. As I got older, 2 things happened. First, my parents got older too, and I started prioritizing time with them. Second, I learned that being an adult was really expensive, so I needed to find ways to maximize my income if I wanted to have the lifestyle I desired. Both of these realizations led me to optimizing my time, and given how valuable this lesson has been to me, I want to share a few ways I've done just that. First, I streamlined my financial activities. Every bill and investment is performed automatically, meaning that I spend next to no time managing my money. Second, I buy back as much time as I physically can. In my businesses, I outsource most of the work and then turn around and use that freed up time to either spend with my parents or make more at a much higher rate. Ultimately, the better you can manage your time, the higher quality of life you will have, especially if you watch this next video where I share how living frugally can make you rich. So click on over and let's get started.